see it. There's no doubt in my mind we're going to go see it. My wife is itching to go see it, so we'll probably knock that out this week. So, all right,
I'm Camp Oppenheimer. I saw the Oppenheimer one.
Did you see it? Yeah. Look at Steven's like, oh, happy Tuesday, gents. Good to see you. Rachel, both of y'all already talking about Barbenheimer. I love it. I've got to get out there and see it.
You need to choose a side here.
I know. I'll pick Oppenheimer. My wife will not like me for that for a while because she's excited to see Barbie more, but my preference is to go see Oppenheimer. So, oh man, Sean, good to see you, man. All right, Christian, you ready to kick off? Let's get rolling.
Yes, absolutely.
Cool. We got a lot to unpack today. So, first and foremost, thanks for hanging out with me as always, and for everybody on the call and in the chat, please ask questions. We want this to be as fun and interactive for everybody. So I already see a couple folks in the chat already. So, but the biggest thing that we're talking about today, 5 cheat codes to maintain high functioning CRMs. I think even just looking in the crowd right now, I already know some pretty familiar faces here, folks that are keeping their CRMs up and running and just good friends of ours in general. But excited to dive into this. But before we get too far in, introductions. I'll let you kick us off. Introduce yourself and tell everybody who you are and what you do.
All right. Hey, everyone. I'm Christian Kletzl. I'm the CEO and co-founder of UserGems. UserGems is a sales and marketing solution. We track your power users champions for job changes. And whenever any of your buyers change a job, there's actually 2 things that happen. Like you have a churn risk on the one hand, wherever they're leaving from, and you have a sales opportunity on the other hand. So we help you enable that at scale. And I think just a little bit about me. I'm the CEO and co-founder, but also I have a tech background. So I was the first Salesforce admin. I created the app. So I definitely went deeper.
I love it. I can speak firsthand for some of the successes that we're seeing with UserGems already. We've only been live, I think, for a month, if that. And already have deals flowing in. We'll talk about UserGems a little bit too, but I'd be remiss if I didn't say we're already loving it and really all the value it's bringing to us.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Of course. And of course, I know I've met most of the folks on this call, but for those that have not met me personally, I'm Brad Smith, co-founder and CEO of Sonar and founder of RevOps, which obviously we have a lot of folks from our community in. So we put these events on all the time, especially for our community, to really grow and learn and become better folks in the greater operation space. And of course, what is at the center of the operation space and most companies in general? Hopefully a high functioning CRM. But as always, we want to keep it interactive. I'm going to go ahead and throw the poll on here too. Is your CRM highly functioning? This is going to be one of those ones where I'm sure you're going to be answering, of course it is. I'm a CRM wizard, but also at the same time, though, always needs a little bit of help. But we definitely want to hear from y'all. So please jump into the poll. Love to see it. Oh, absolutely not. That's why I'm here. At least we've got some folks that are honest, which I can always appreciate. The reality is the CRM space, and whether it be HubSpot, Salesforce, Dynamic, pick your poison, the reality is it is at the epicenter of most businesses, and we all do our best to try to keep it clean, keep it tidy, and make it as much of a high-functioning CRM as humanly possible. So we're going to talk about not only CRM, but also some of the connected apps that you're using in your greater tech stack and how those can coincide with keeping everything highly functioning. So I love to see the poll so far. Look, about 50-50 on, of course, and absolutely not. And then, of course, a couple folks no, but I'm afraid to admit it. So totally fine. Hopefully by the end of this session, you get a little bit more tips and tricks on how to keep your CRM high functioning. So with that being said, let's dive right in. We're going to go into the very first question, or the first topic of this, and I'm going to minus out the poll. Still open, so feel free to jump in the poll. But I think the biggest thing to talk about when we think about a high-functioning CRM and keeping it clean, how do we even just start to reduce tech debt to increase that type of sales efficiency? And while we have sales on here, this also goes for customer success, for finance, services, not just for sales. But interesting story. Christian, you and I were catching up on this, but I found it fascinating. We just brought on a new AE to our team. During the interview, I always love asking this question. So for anybody that's going to be interviewed at Sonar at some point, here's your pro tip. I'm going to ask this question. Tell me about your optimal tech stack. It was a really interesting feedback he gave to me because he's had 2 different jobs and had 2 wildly different tech stacks and CRMs in the middle of it. One was a tech forward company, so they had 40 plus tools in their tool belt, and the other was not as much of a tech related business. He was still in sales, but it wasn't in like the B2B SaaS arena that we're all in. I think he only had 3 or 4 different pieces of technology. And I just bluntly asked, I was like, Alex, which one did you prefer? He's like, I'll be honest, man, less is more. I really enjoyed only having a handful of tools in my tool belt. And I didn't necessarily have to overthink a lot of my processes or overthink what my day to day job was. Ultimately, I was getting more time to actually go talk to customers and prospects. And so it was interesting to hear him say that he actually enjoyed a little bit more of a lighter weight and a less busy or less crazy tech stack and CRM. But it just goes to show that you very much want to be pointed in the things that you have. But what we can all agree on, and I know that a lot of folks, even in here, folks I've talked to, especially Stephen, you and I've talked about this before, but tech debt can jump up there real fast. I know that I want your perspective of this, Christian, but when we all think of tech debt and again, keeping a high functioning CRM, you really want to make sure that you're eliminating as much of that as possible. Hard thing is, though, sometimes to even find it. But yeah, when you think of tech debt, Christian, how do you think about optimizing that and keeping that high functioning for your CRM?
Yeah, I think, I mean, we're talking technology, but it already starts on like the sales and marketing front with like the signals, like how many signals are you getting in? And then ultimately just looking into how many of these signals, like let's say marketing brings on this like intent signal or let's say job change signal, like there's a ton of signals coming in. And then if you look at which signals are actually consistently being actioned by the SDR, you'll find that only a fraction of them. So I think that ultimately the tech debt already starts with like the signal debt that you're getting on the one hand, and then you have the choice like how much can I? Like, we were in the wild west like 2 years ago. My brother co-founder called it like the wild west of purchasing, where you just bought all the tools and then you figured out which ones you actually need. I think we're getting better at changing back to actually here's the tools that I need. But I think the question ultimately, look at the signals that you get at the end, and then how do you get those signals being actioned? And I think it's a mixture of you need training, like sales enablement, sales training, as well as notification and automation. And this then goes into the technical details of, okay, how can I avoid the tech debt to actually make sure I can enable the team and I can automate and notify the right people.
Absolutely. Well, and that's going to be one of the next things we talk about is the automation side of this, because just staying on track with the tech debt side of things, though, you're spot on. I think more than anything, it's sort of that begin with the end in mind, not to go all 7 halves on people, but if you start to think about, here's what I'm trying to accomplish, here's really what I'm trying to get delivered, whether it be for my SDRs, my AEs, my CSMs, this is what I want. Work backwards to go find that, but ultimately make sure that you're absolutely not just creating more and more tech debt as you go. But you mentioned that really good keyword that we're going to now switch over to, automations and introducing automations to save your team time. Obviously, this is a very technical crowd when you start to think about the operations world and Salesforce admins and admins of other tools. When you start to think about automations, how do you think about justifying the right automations to build and bringing those to your team?
Yeah, and I don't know how deep technically you want to go there. I think I like this like starting with the end in mind. We have like everyone is always called automation, right? I don't want to get it wrong, and I'd rather not automate than automate and getting a certain percentage wrong. So the way I actually start the thought process is always like there will be false ones. So what is a percentage you're okay to accept? And I think this should be like a few percent, but that are fine. But then like going into more the details of the automation, for me, it's always if my training tells my SDR, AE, CSM that if A happens, then you should be doing B. Like an assumption, like an example is, I get this signal in and the company is now, let's say, high priority account. So what I want you to do is identify, let's say, the VP of sales and reach out to them. How much of this like if I expect you to do this anyway, and there's a clear path, then I actually want to automate this. So if I don't need any the big decision, how much of this can I automate? And we've seen, like, and if we talk about automation, we need to talk about a few steps, because the first step is actually in my Salesforce, like which signals are coming in that I can then use with my, like, for example, lead data or any flow that I have in there. And then the second piece is automation doesn't mean that everything at the end is also automatic. So we then talk about how much of my cadences, sequences are automatic. And what we learned that works best is actually baby steps here. So this means, like in our case, we do job changes. So we tell them, okay, here's a person, he's a closed one previously, now company, that's your ICP. 100%, you want them to reach out. So what you do is automate into a sequence, and then the sequence is manual. And so basically looking into, okay, what are the baby steps, like the micro commits, and as soon as this works, commit further and further to maybe even automate part of the sequence.
Totally. You mentioned something really big, and I'll kind of call it out here too. Not everything gets automated, and not all the way to the end, right? I think you just kind of personally reflecting on my journey of starting as a Salesforce admin, moving up through different operations roles, and obviously starting a business of our own. I wish we could automate everything. But looking all the way back to even my days as an admin, I laughed sometimes, also cried sometimes when I got all these silly requests coming in for, hey, Brad, can we automate X, Y, or Z? It's going to make my day much easier. And in my early days, it's like, of course we can. Like, I know how to build so many different flows and workflow rules and process builders and Apex classes. Those are easy things to go and help trigger and build some of these automations. But time of my career, I didn't really ask why enough. Like, I don't know.
Yep.
Why are we
Yes.
actually doing this? And so, if you take anything away from today, yes, Stephanie, you're right. We can, but should we? I couldn't agree more. And this is such an interesting topic for that.
Yeah. And I think the question is then also the how, because you also run the risk of having automation in different toolings. And you can, I think Salesforce had like 4 different ways of doing this. And then you can also do outreach if you want to, for example, or Sales Lab. So I think that's actually then the biggest, if we talk very technically, it's like, how can I have this? How can I keep the overview of this?
Yes, that's exactly it. Well, I think that's obviously a lot of folks here that have used Sonar in the past and currently still using it. That's one of the biggest pieces that we try to overlap and really highlight. It's like, hey, yes, you can see all these applications in your CRM and Salesforce, but let's make sure we also have some of that connective automations between these other systems, because every system now has some of these automations. All right, I'm gonna switch gears a little bit to switching over to data quality. Obviously, we know what we can do with keeping tech debt out and refining the right automations, but at the end of the day, ensuring that we have ongoing data quality for any prospect, customers, prospects, doesn't matter, even if they change jobs. I think, if I'm not mistaken, this is a sweet spot. This is exactly what UserGems does, and I'll even kick this off too, just to tell you, a lot of our personal wins so far in this space have come from UserGems and being able to use this. But yeah, when you start to think about the data quality side of things, what comes to mind, and what tip do you think for that on the high functioning CRM?
Yeah, and I'll try to do this without like mentioning user terms too much. But I think the first thought is actually, like, especially if this is like a 5-year, 10-year-old CRM, ultimately you have a whole lot of data in there. And I think what's really important is your company actually paid a whole lot of money for this data, right? Like every single contact, every account that's in there, you paid a lot of money. But what's actually really difficult is figuring out how up to date is this information. The 250 people like contacts that I have in this account, are they actually still there? Is this the up-to-date title? And the issue here is that basically the more I pay at the beginning to get a whole lot of contacts in there, the more outdated my data will be after a few years, and the less my salespeople trust it. And I think there's this sweet spot after which is like, if the data is so, like, if I don't trust the data much, then my first step is actually not Salesforce, but actually LinkedIn, which means that all the contacts that are in there and that I paid data for are actually not being used. So the thought for us is actually, even like a job change ultimately has 2 ends, right? Where they're leaving from and where they're going to. And even just focusing on the where they're leaving from piece is all about bringing the trust back into the Salesforce. So I want to be able to go in there and quickly see, okay, who's there, what's their title, seniority, department, and who's involved in a deal. And if I can't do that, then basically everything I've done before is wasted.
Totally, totally. It's fun. We talk about this all the time. Even here at Sonar, data should be the life of your business, and it obviously should be sitting in your CRM. But if you ever find yourself in a poor data quality side of things, at that point it's just garbage in and garbage out. You're not
Yeah,
even actually getting anything. And I know a lot of folks, even on in the chat and folks that are attending right now, have had personal conversations with about how do we maintain that high level and high integrity of our data. I think the other just kind of big thing to kind of call out here too is the reality of our ecosystem is that things are very fluid. In a goofy way, I
that's
can't
why
remember this
that's
too.
why we have a business. I think, like
Yeah,
if we talk
exactly.
fluid about people changing their job, absolutely. I think especially the last 2 3 years have been madness, and that's why this becomes more and more of a need. Yeah.
That's exactly it. I was you were talking with our like head of HR as we're interviewing and recruiting. I was like, it's harder now than ever to go through things like that, mainly because so many things have changed. Even like if you just book in right now of 2020 when COVID started, there were so many different job changes and reasons, rationales as to why. But keeping that asking those questions is always going to be important in an interview cycle, of course. But keeping that level of information in your CRM as well, kind of getting back on the CRM side of things. If we don't keep track of that, then how are we even supposed to think about what this person's background was, when they left, how they arrived, and so on? So
Yeah.
really,
Yeah, I think like to go like both business and technical, like for us, a really big element that we look into for every deal is um that's also a little bit the next point, but like who's involved and more specifically who's not involved but should be. And I think if I go in there and either I'm missing people in in my Salesforce that I should know about but don't have, or I have people there that I am not at the company anymore, then it really changes about exactly buying committee. Like I need to like every single statistic right now says, and we have the same. Like we know that if we involve we have sales, marketing, operations as our key personas. If we involve all three, then we have a 5x win. And so really for us, it's immediately this next step. Like after the initial call, we go into Salesforce trying to figure out who else is there that we should involve. So if either we're not capturing who we are talking to and therefore don't know who's already involved, or if we don't have the right people, then we cannot like get the rest of the buying committee, which then lowers the win rate.
totally. Well, that's just kind of flipping our gears too, thinking about capturing all those participants in meetings. It's always been one of the things, even as I've trained new sellers, I've been a seller myself, it's hard. Like, and half the time, this happens to us all a fair amount of times, we'll be on a Zoom or on a meeting with a customer or prospect, and they're like, hey, hang tight. I think I want Kayla to join this call. And they add Kayla in. And that's not one of those things, you don't see that on the calendar event. They just send the Zoom link, and you start to lose a little bit of that. The quality of that data for one, but you just lose that buyer intent side of things. Like, wow, I didn't even think that we need to have Kayla as one of our persons in the buying committee. But Stephanie's spot on. Buying committees are key, and
Yep.
capturing that automatically is big. I think the one thing too that we've already seen, just kind of going back to being able to work with you all and user gems, when you start to enroll those other people in, and you're really creating that really big committee for that, you're one not only ensuring hopefully a higher level of success at the finish line when you close that deal, but you're also just getting more buy-in and stakeholders, which obviously numbers are magic for that, right?
OMG. Okay, I think more than like we're talking about this from the churn prevention aspect, but also from like the saving the deal. Everyone has seen a deal where there's like one person involved and suddenly that person's gone. And I think if that person is finding a new job, they might even have the time to tell you. But right now, specifically over the last year, if the company did some layoff, they did not have time to tell you. Suddenly that deal is dead because you were in touch with one person. So I love to quote Hamilton on this, like be in the room where it happens. You can't be directly in that room, but how many people do you have that can be in that room? And it's really, really your job to make this number as big as possible.
I love that. Yeah, be in the room where it happens. Like if you're not in that part of it, then yeah, you're just multi-thread is key. Exactly, Stephen. You got
And,
to be in the room. You got to be the right folks.
and we all know this, and it's still so hard to actually do this consistently. Like there's so many deals right now where there's this one champion, and like fingers crossed, this person stays. but even more so, we have this huge initiative not only on the sales side but the CS side. How many more people can we involve? We have we send updates of like, here's what UserGems does for your team. We not only send it to our champions but to their managers and to the decision makers, because these are the people that ultimately make the decision about UserGems, and they unless they know about us, the worse it will be on the renewal conversation. So you get these weekly emails just for that reason.
Absolutely. And again, getting back to just the overall side of things, when we think about how this is relative to our CRM, I mean, as admins and ops folks that look at a lot of folks on the attendee list here, everybody's had that question come to them before, like, hey, we need to have those alerts. And so just being able to automatically capture those is so key, which does bring me into our last point. And I'm going to flip over to the next topic when we're talking about targeting your next customers. One of the reasons why I bring this up, though, as we get into our last topic, we've got plenty of time to keep jamming, but for everybody on the call, we want this to be for you. So if you have questions, drop them in the chat, throw them over in the Q&A, whatever works best. But we'll flip over to Q&A next. But yeah, when you think about targeting your next customer with that level of precision, it's massively important and beneficial. But how do y'all think about that as you've built UserGems and just, again, maintain a high level of data integrity in your CRM?
Yeah. I think it's a data integrity, and it's figuring out who am I missing, like who's there that I don't know about. And to me, this is like we have reporting for like which departments are involved, which seniority level is involved, and this is where RevOps then comes into play. For example, we have automatic alerts sent out to the rep, to the manager, if they put it in a certain stage and we only have one persona, or if they put it in commit and we don't have a VP in the deal, that's a red alert. Like this gets highlighted. And I think this is where RevOps, like what technically like we need to work with sales and marketing to figure out, okay, how can I really make sure this deal is actually what the salesperson says it is?
I love that as like a qualified aspect of it, right? Like, guys, we don't get to go into stage 4 or stage 5, whatever. Everybody's funnels are different, but we don't have not earned the right to get to that stage yet if we don't have a buyer in there and somebody that's truly going to be writing a check. Like, we need to be able to have somebody.
Correct.
I think
Yeah.
one thing I was going to share too on that kind of going back to the fluidity side of like resourcing and kind of in the new, I don't say like generation we're in, but I've joked around with my parents before, like we're not in our parents' generation where somebody has 1 or 2 jobs for their entire career, especially in the Salesforce centric space that we're all operating in. And we did a poll through WizOps last year. We're going to do it again towards the end of this year. But last year it was staggering. The average, I'm going to say shelf life, but the average tenure of a Salesforce professional, so think Salesforce admin, architect, RevOps, etc., 18 months. And which is totally fine, especially right now, given like we're talking about earlier, COVID, markets changing and things like that. So there's just a lot of fluidity, but being able to capture that and keeping that level of integrity or data integrity in your CRM, massively beneficial. So I love it.
I think that like obviously my statement there is always love it. People change your job, so you can be sold again or like the solution. But I really like thinking about it from we all know customer lifetime value. I really like thinking about it as a champion lifetime value. It's like buyers. It's ultimately a human that buys a product. So my goal is to turn as many people as possible, even within one organization, into a champion. And therefore, if these people then change their job, I can like create this relationship again, sell to them again. So make sure that like you have a whole lot of champions.
Totally, it is, and I think I know it brings you the same amount of joy it does me when you have one of those champions that you've sold to before. Great customer, obviously they move to a new role, whether it be for many different reasons, but that first either LinkedIn message or that first email or first text message, like, hey, Brad, I just got a new job. Definitely want to bring Sonar on. I love that. But the reality is, with our businesses the way they are, many businesses, everybody here that's on the call, it's almost impossible to keep your fingers crossed and make sure that, I logged into LinkedIn at the right time to see that person get a new job. So having that functionality in your CRM alerting you about it is just so key.
It's actually not even our statistic, and I feel like it's even too high. But someone had a statistic that said if your champion is leaving or left, you have 65% churn risk. So it's like, and some people tell you immediately, right? The good customers tell you immediately. It's the middle ground that you could have saved from a churn that isn't going to tell you. And then you send a renewal email and then it bounces and then you need to find the new champion and then you don't have enough time. So specifically for this middle ground, it's actually where you need the notifications ASAP so that the CA can be on top of it.
That's exactly it. And we've all felt it, seen it, and experienced it. Even, if you do like red, yellow, green accounts, like how we kind of score everybody, green accounts, you get that bounce back where it's, hey, I'm just sending you a message because we're 120 days out from renewal, and it bounces back. You're like, oh no, like I have already very much forecasted this one to be fully retained and didn't even think that our champion left. So again, having those automations and keeping your CRM up to date that way is so spot on. So reading immediately the flags in early cycles, but having those flags are existing customers. Yes, you're spot on. I love it. Well, I know we've got a few more minutes. Definitely toss your questions in. I'm also going to throw a couple of new things up here. You and I are hanging out in a couple of weeks together. So
yes.
join us out at Dreamforce. We've got a happy hour we're putting on the 12th. I got to keep all my dates right. But we also, so definitely click for folks coming out to join Dreamforce. Please come join us for happy hour. But more importantly, we have Shops Talk on the Road, which for those that haven't heard this yet, we have a party bus that fits exactly or approximately 30 people. We're going to test that number, see how many more people we can get in there. But we're doing 2 Shops Talks on the Road sessions out there, Christian's being one of them. So please jump onto the webinar. Cool part is, even if you're not out in San Francisco for Dreamforce, we're still live streaming it. So definitely check out Shops Talk on the Road. On Tuesday is our session, Christian, but then on Wednesday, I've got our good friend, everybody knows Salesforce Ben from salesforceben.com.
Nice.
But Ben and I were jamming the other day. He's like, oh man, we haven't done a webinar in a while. It's like, you're going to be in San Francisco, I assume, for Dreamforce. Like, of course. Well, jump on the bus and let's have another webinar. So we've got Ben jumping on with us too on Wednesday to talk all things state of Salesforce, which will be super fun. So
this is very exciting. Well, join the bus. I'm very excited.
I can't wait. It's going to be fun. So we've got a couple surprises in there too. So you'll keep everybody waiting in a little bit of anxiety for Dreamforce in a couple weeks. But last but not least, question I've got for you. Obviously, our audience is a mix of a ton of different people, but very operations forward. So I always love asking this at the end of every one of our Shops Talks. When you think back in your career, obviously you've done a tremendous job building user gems and all through your career, but early days of your career, what advice would you give yourself retrospectively now to say, like, man, you know what? I wish I would have done this different, or I would have prioritized that. What career advice do you have for our operations folks on the call?
So, I mean, I think generally for operation, I think there's advice that I give everyone because I think it applies to everyone, but I'll have a more specific one. The advice I give to I have this onboarding session for new employees, and the one advice is listen more, talk less. And I think this applies to everyone. So I just want to throw it out there. Like I tell this to my AEs, to my CSM. I think for the other piece, which kind of like also applies to everyone, but it's actually try to understand as much as possible about your customer. And I mean, we all have different customers, but we all have customers. Like try to be in their shoes. And I think what I was missing right from the beginning is like I thought I do understand what they care about, but boy was I wrong. Like I had no idea about the whole Salesforce ecosystem, about how a sales process works, how the marketing sales handoff is, and why sometimes they're enemies and sometimes not. So really, really trying to understand everything about what this person cares about. Like basically your stakeholders or holder has like 3 things they care about. Like in my case right now, if it's not one of those 3, I just don't have time for them. So try to understand what those 3 are as much as possible, and then help them fix it.
I love that. It kind of goes back to some of those first principles too, of just asking why, like being genuinely curious about asking why, but also you get to the bottom of it just by asking why a handful more times. So I completely agree with you. I'll leave this with everybody here too. One of the reasons that I love asking that question, I was in the same boat. I didn't ask enough questions early in my career. I don't think I was curious. I was curious by nature, but I wasn't curious enough in like a business sense to ask more like leading business why. But at the same time, I realized like the world of Salesforce and operations is relatively lean. We all have lean teams, not many huge RevOps teams out there. So I was always searching for people to collaborate with, network with, which is obviously one of the biggest reasons why we built Wizards of Ops, our community, to do that. But at the same time, ask why and ask a lot of find those networks, find those communities, and get in there and be active. So kind of that parting word. If folks on here, I'm pretty sure I know everybody, and everybody's already in WizOps. But if you're not, please jump in. I'll put the link. I should have put a button in there, but wizops.org. Please jump into the community. We'd love to have you. And yeah, we'll keep it going from there. But Christian, I know you're a busy man. I get to see you in a few weeks out at Dreamforce. But,
Love it.
Until
Love
then,
the monthly cadence. Excited to see you soon in person.
I love it. Well, really appreciate you jumping on with us again, and we will talk to you soon. Hope everybody has a great rest of your day.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, everybody.